Hello, everyone, and welcome and warm welcome to you from wherever you are in this live broadcast of Expert Talk Show presented by me, Sarah Brada. In this show, I select for you experts in the field to solve one of our life problems and give you the expert solution to your own struggles. The purpose of this show is to elevate our lives to a higher level, raise our awareness, spread knowledge, and encourage personal developments. Today's episode number 3, I host Nesreen Ahmed, the founder and CEO of Harbor Light Coaching LLC, professional certified coach. Nesreen Ahmed is a pioneer in the world of grief, loss, and change, and is committed to providing transformational coaching to clients around the world. Nisrin coaching is focusing on helping clients find peace after a loss, divorce, or illness. She supports them in addressing their mindsets, overcoming the hurdles of grief, and completing what's unfinished. Nisrin holds the PCC credentials from the International Coaching Federation and a master's in communication, and is certified professional positive intelligence coach. Grief is challenging and messy, and that's why we're hosting Nisreen with us today. And I'm super excited to have you with me today. Thank you for accepting the invitation, and let's see how it goes tonight with all of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here, and I hope that we can, help answer a lot of questions that people have when they go through loss.
Thank you so much. So first of all, can you please describe for us what grief is and what it looks like? Is it an emotional state or a mental state? What is it?
Sure. So grief is really, the fallout, the feelings, the emotions, everything that happens because of a change in a familiar pattern or behavior, right? So it's not just when we lose a loved one. There's so many different things that can cause grief. There's over 50, 60 different life events that cause grief. And certainly it's emotional and mental, but it's also physical and a spiritual experience, right? So it is a change in pretty much everything that we know, or everything that we feel, everything that we think, everything that we might believe spiritually, right, or religiously. So it definitely kind of overwhelms us on a holistic level.
Mm-hmm. So I see it's like an emotional, it's a mental, it's a little bit of all of that. So and I hear you also saying that grief happens like when there is a loss, and that's why I want to get clear first, because whenever we talk about grief, the first thing that pops to our mind is death, like the loss of somebody or loved one or somebody we know. So is this the only case scenario, or what is it, all the type of griefs that we can undergo?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many that I probably will, or I definitely won't be able to list them all, right? But other common ones include divorce, include moving, include job loss, financial, changes or situations that we run into, pandemics, and changes in our routine. And so many people working from home, taking care of their kids, they can't go out. There's all these different things that we have been grieving over the last year and a half, right? But empty nest, having a baby or getting married, even some positive things that we don't think of necessarily associated with grief can definitely cause grief, because we're still sort of like mourning or dealing with the changes, that come from having a baby, for example, or come from getting married, where we kind of miss what was, right? Or we can't go back to what was. And so there's even some grief there.
Mm-hmm. So grief is also during this pandemic, like it just like a loss of so many things that we lost. Like even I saw also like there is a type of loss which is like of a dream and a loss of something that we want to achieve for ourselves. So grieving is not only like for human being death, but also for our dreams death, or for some things that we were so much attached to. So and so this drives me to my next question, which is how to know that we are in grieving period or mourning period.
So there's some things that you can So it's different for everybody. Let me start there,
Mhm.
right? It's going to be different for everybody, but there are some telltale signs, if you will. So one of them could be that you are, it's hard to focus, it's hard to concentrate. You might walk into a room and you kind of forget why you were there, why you came in, or you find yourself at work and you're kind of just, thinking about other things. Obviously, if you've gone through something very specific, that's obviously going to be a huge sign that you're grieving right now. But also people have trouble, or they have changes in their eating habits, changes in their sleep habits, feeling like they might feel a little less excited, putting it nicely. They might feel hopeless, right? Putting it on the
Mhm.
more extreme end. So depending on how they're feeling and sort of a major shift in how they're feeling, a major shift in how they're thinking, right? That could be another sign that like, oh, I might be grieving right now.
Mm-hmm. So it's basically like there will be a lot of symptoms in terms of emotional, and I feel also some physical, right? Would there be like some physical symptoms also along the line?
Absolutely. I mean, again, kind of that brain fog of like not being able to focus or concentrating, forgetting, being very forgetful and not remembering things that you normally might, the inability to focus, like I said. And then again, just feeling a little more lethargic. It's harder to get up and get through the day. You're
Mm-hmm.
not as energetic. You may not be working out. Again, the changes in eating or sleeping, these can all be telltale signs that you're going through grief.
Mm-hmm. And also, I feel like there would be like different symptoms in here that we're speaking on that we might be like in common with some other types of mental issues or anxiety or depression, or maybe like it sounds like maybe some familiar for some other people. So these symptoms doesn't mean automatic that you are in grief, but probably like you still need to double check different criteria. So do you have like any technique or any way to like to really assess that we are in grief period or uh,
Well, I'll be honest, most of the people that I work with understand that they're in grief. Most people have gone through something pretty traumatic that they're suddenly like, okay, I'm definitely grieving right now. I don't find too many people questioning whether they're grieving. Moreover, than they're just like something's going on. Like they might be kind of in that place of like there's something going on. And so one of the things that I did was actually create a grief assessment so that people who know that they're grieving can figure out who they should be seeing depending on where they are in their grieving process. So they might need a grief coach, they might need a grief counselor, they might need a therapist. So people can go to my website and take that assessment so that they can get a better sense of who they should see and therefore save themselves a lot of time and energy, maybe seeing the wrong kind of support structure. But if you're kind of just curious, you're not sure if you're grieving or not, but you are starting to feel some of these symptoms, or maybe like you said, you're feeling that level of anxiety, of depression, I would start with your doctor first and really kind of take a look at what you've experienced recently. And if there's
mhm.
anything major that has happened, anything significant that you feel like has changed, that would be a good starting point to kind of explore and say, okay, what about this has been upsetting or has been, uh, you know, jarring to me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's beautiful. So I just like for those people who are listening to us. So please go to pages.harborlightcoaching.com. That's her website. And please go on and check the assessment if you are undergoing any type of loss. So again, loss is not only like the human being loss of loved one, but also some other type of love of a dream or career or separation, divorce, or any type of, or even like when a child goes abroad from their parents, that's also a type
Mhm.
of grieving period in there. So there are a lot of things that can you can go through in these periods of time. So better assess yourself if you are right or not. So this now we would like to go into what are the different layers of grieving. Now we know that we are in grief. Okay, we know that this is what it is, and what are the different layers to grieving, and then what. Just tell us a little bit more about this.
Sure. So I talk about the layers of grief quite often because, especially like if we're focusing on losing someone like a death, right?
Mhm.
It's not just losing that person dying, right? It's also the hopes and dreams that you had, like you're talking about, like those dreams that you have for your life. You have dreams for your relationship, right, with your person, whether that's a family member, a friend, a spouse. You have certain expectations, and so losing those, and then especially if you've lost a spouse, but really any loss, like there's so many different things that come come with losing your person, whether it's the financial security, whether it's the support system and parenting, whether it's just having that person there in your life to support you through the ups and downs. There's different things that you go through. And then the ramifications of loss, like a lot of times in families, there's, fight over the inheritance, or there's, division over like who was loved more. There's some competition. People grieve really differently. And a lot of times they might take their grief out, or as a way to avoid their grief, they might start to distance themselves from the people that they love. And so you might find that you're really struggling with your sibling after your parent has passed away, right? Like you might find that normally you'd be okay, or you'd be in a good position with them, but now it's really difficult, right? And so even that can cause some grief, because suddenly you don't have, your sibling to rely on like you used to. So there's a lot of different things that come with losing your person. There's a lot of secondary losses. And that's what I talk about when I talk about those layers of grief. It's not just the one major loss. It's then all of these other losses that will compound our grief and make it that much harder to just get through our day.
So if I understand it right, it's like basically like are these like similar to the stages, or is just like this is completely different? I'm just like getting a little bit confused in here.
So the stages of grief that most people know about are different than what I'm talking about. First of all,
Okay.
I actually don't believe that there are stages, and there's a growing sort of movement within the grief community that really stages don't exist, because it's not linear. And the original 5 stages were actually meant for people who are dying, not necessarily for people who are grieving. Well, we can get to that in a minute. But the layers of grief, the different secondary losses that we experience, are very real, right? And 9 times out of 10, anybody who's gone through a loss is going to experience a lot of those different things. Again, it might be some family issues, it might be distancing or isolating themselves, it might be issues with finances, it might be issues with parenting, these different things that come up because we don't even, we may not even think about it, because that person has always been there, they've always been in our lives, and we've gotten so used to having them there to take care of these things or to help with these things. I'm thinking back to a woman that I worked with a few years ago who suddenly was fully in charge of everything, whether it was her kids, whether it was her finances, whether it was her work, just trying to, the house and all the issues, having to deal with, not just, having to deal with her husband's belongings that were still there, but then the repairs that needed to be happening on the house. There's all these different things that her husband used to take care of or help with, that she was suddenly fully responsible for. And that's what I mean, like when I talk about the layers of grief.
So it's like there are some things that are like consequences that happen from whatever that event that we undergone. So and this can be like in different tasks that's coming, in different jobs that we're gonna be adopting, or different things that we have to adapt ourselves to the new life, to the new environment, to the new things that we have to survive with. And
Absolutely. I always talk about the different the new reality that we have to learn to walk through, because, very often when someone goes through a loss, everything feels different. They're seeing the world through a different lens, right? And they're seeing their life through a different lens. And so we really have to take the time to adapt and learn how to, first of all, just stand, right? And then we can start to walk through that reality and adjust and find what we can, adjust outside of us to help make things easier as well.
So this drives me to think, like, is there like any time frame for grieving, or like if there'd be any quick way to overcome this?
I get that question a lot, like, how long is this going to take, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And there's 2 answers. One is, forever, right? Grief isn't necessarily something that you finish, or that you accomplish. But there are sort of like the initial periods of grief where it's really intense and might be traumatic, and it might be something that you're really struggling with in the beginning, right? And then depending on, what work you do and how proactive you are, you might be able to move through that a little bit faster. But really, there's no specific timeline. There's no, end date, and there's no specific timeline, because it is really individual. Like, grief is one of those things that, while there are different, symptoms and different or similar symptoms and similar experiences that people go through, it's so highly individualized that it really is your grief journey, and nobody can tell you how long it's going to take, and nobody going to tell you how, how you're going to feel, right? Like I always say that grief is something that happens to us. And so even we can't control it, even we can't say, I'm going to feel good today because tomorrow I need to do something or I need to focus, right? Like it doesn't work like that. And so I talk a lot with my clients about learning to ride the waves and let grief happen while also being able to take care of yourself, being able to take care of your family, your responsibilities. So it's definitely a balance, but unfortunately, there's no specific timeline of when you can expect to feel better or when you can expect to be able to start doing whatever it is, whether it's like, starting to seek a new relationship or starting to create a memorial or starting to, just in general, like I don't think about them as much. There's work you can do, right? But there's not necessarily a specific timeline to complete it.
So basically, each one has their own journey through this grieving period, and some people might probably take it in for like few days, some others few weeks, some others months, some others years. So each one has its own journey of grieving, and also like I believe there is no right or wrong way of doing it. Like each one has their own way of grieving, and there isn't any the quick way or fast way, but there is like each like personal strategies and personal way of how you are dealing with that loss. But still doesn't this stop us from thinking about what are the strategies that people can adopt in order to overcome grief in general? What's the best strategies or the most effective and efficient strategies out there?
Well, one of the things that I've really started to focus on when it comes to all of the grief work that I do is helping people see that there is the just the missing of your person, right? The love that you have and the absolute heartbreak that you won't be able to see them, talk to them, hold them again, right? And then there's a lot of the things that need to be forgiven. I was going to say there's a lot of noise in our head that goes on about what we didn't do, what we should have said, how they were in the relationship, how we, maybe there was something that happened right at the end of the relationship that we regret a lot. So there's a lot of work to be done around just forgiveness, right? And learning how to, whether it's forgive yourself or forgive the other person or forgive the circumstances and situations, right? But really starting to resolve all of the things in our head that keep us suffering, that keep us really going deeper and deeper and getting more and more lost in our grief because we can't forgive ourselves. We can't believe that we said that, or we can't believe we did that or didn't do that. We should have seen more. We should have known more. And vice versa. It might be about the other person, right? So that's the work that I help people with. That's the work that I get people to do, is really starting to, practice that forgiveness and understand that your brain is going to be telling you all these different things on repeat forever, for as long as you let it. It's going to be talking about the shoulda, woulda, couldas. It's going to be talking about the if onlys. It's going to be talking about and judging you, judging, your behavior, judging the other person. So the more that we can, and the sooner that we can start to resolve that, the more and easier it becomes to just be with the heartbreak, right? To be with the longing for your person and understand that how things went were exactly how things went and nothing more.
So I hear there is a lot of forgiveness in there, and also acceptance of the fact that this thing has happened, and now it's part of the story. It's part of who you are right now, or part of your journey. And so, is there any more strategies like forgiveness and acceptance? Is there any other things, tips that people can use or do on a daily basis in order to alleviate their grief or help them just feel better about themselves?
I mean, I always start with the basics whenever I talk to somebody. It's like, how's your eating? How's your sleep? How's your movement? I think of those as sort of the foundational, because when the body and the mind and the spirit, are so low, we need to like prop that up. We need to start working on that. And sometimes it's just the basics of having that sort of tripod of health and well-being in place to help our mind, to help our spirit, right? Like we can't have a weak body and expect to have a strong mind. And so it really helps to have those three things in place. And if you're not, addressing them, figure out what you can do. Do you need to see a coach or somebody who's going to help hold you accountable to make sure that you're taking care of your eating habits and really eating well, taking care of your body, making sure you're moving. When I lost my sister, one of the first things I did was get a personal trainer, and I fully admit there were days where I showed up in tears, unable to stop crying, but I was like, I need to move. I need something to help my body feel better, just so I can get through the day, right? And so physical exercise, we know the benefits of it, right? We know the benefits of nutrition. We know the benefits of sleep. And so making sure that we get enough of each of those is really, I would say the first place to start. And then from there, it becomes more about, okay, well, what else do I need right now? Do I need a support system? Are there people in my life that I can talk to that I feel comfortable and safe with? Do they know how to hold space for me, how to not judge me, how to not try to fix what I'm feeling or what I'm saying, but actually just let me experience this, or let me be where I'm at in front of them, right, or with them. And if not, I would say that's another place to start, because it's so easy to isolate, and it's so easy to assume that nobody's going to understand how you feel, and you're not. It's not worth it to try to find someone, right? And so I would definitely say, get some kind of support where you feel like, whether it's a coach, it's a support group, it's a counselor, it's a therapist. There's a lot of different. There's apps now, if that's really the route that you want to take. There's so many different things that you can do. Just to start getting a little bit of support, kind of a connection to at least a few other people who can be there for you if you have, a really difficult day or a really intense moment, an hour, having somebody you can reach out to also is incredibly valuable. So that's definitely another place to start. There's different schools of healing, if you will, some from trauma, or some are more related to trauma, and some are more related to just overall how you feel. I'm a big fan of acupuncture. I've heard wonderful things about EMDR, which is, again, more for trauma. There's also havening. I know somebody who is a certified havening specialist, and so he offers, ways to help comfort your body through physical touch and different neurological work that you would do. It's very easy. It sounds really impressive, but it's very easy. So there's a lot of different things you can start to do on more alternative, using more alternative methods to also help yourself work through your grief.
That's amazing. So there are a lot of things that people can do actually, and a lot of tips that somebody can pick, actually just one or two, and already just like get the most of it, and it will be already sufficient by itself. But of course, this depends on each one person. So probably I would say like one person probably will work well with acupuncture itself. Some other people would need some coach, or another like maybe therapy, or so please go ahead and go have a consultation, or please go just like check out like what is the with somebody who will advise you best what is the best strategy for you. But it's good to have a support system, some people around you to support you, family members, friends to talk to, and to share your pain and your period. So a loss is quite inevitable in our life, and there are a lot of ways to help cope with the pain, to come to terms with your grief, etc. And eventually you will pick the best strategy for you. So and this takes a process. This is a time period. So Nisreen, how do people deal in this period of mourning, of grieving? So what is the best thing, or just like how to deal with it in that period of process of healing?
Mm-hmm. It's again a really individual process. I would say, first of all, just understanding where you're at, right? Like, are you at the point where you feel so hopeless that it's hard to get up out of bed? Are you feeling so anxious or depressed, right? Like, there are certain things that happen to your body, right? Your brain starts to flood your body with different hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, and it starts to make you really tense, and it can be really hard to get to a place where you feel kind of baseline okay, right? So that's when I would recommend maybe medication, maybe therapy, seeing someone who can help diagnose if you have, even if it's just a short-term, anxiety medication or something to help you sleep, that could be one way to start dealing with the initial loss. I know a lot of people that don't want to take medication. There's also herbal remedies and melatonin, some more natural things you can take to also help you sleep. So, figuring out what exactly your comfort level is and also what your needs are, I would say would be the first step. And again, having a really strong support system. So often we feel like we have to do it alone. We have to carry this weight alone. We don't want to be a burden to other people, or, they say the wrong things. They feel like they don't really give us the love and patience that we need in that moment. So I talk a lot about also like practicing self-compassion, practicing, treating yourself like you would an infant, like you
Yeah.
were very often are in a very raw and vulnerable state. And, I always think about like, what would you do for an infant if she's crying or if he's crying? How would you give that love and support, that endless patience, right? And trying to give that to yourself is a challenge. Like we don't do that when we're not grieving, most of the time. And so learning, especially when we're that raw and that vulnerable and that low, to be able to give ourselves the same level of compassion and love is so, so key. And then from there, taking it one step at a time, one day at a time, figuring out again what you need, who's going to be the best support for you. Maybe you want to grieve in a support group with a community of people, right? And how to do that, how to find the right place or the right person, or excuse me, the right group, can be, a journey in and of itself. But I really encourage people to do things like that, because at the end of the day, it's going to be so much more beneficial than trying to do it alone. And your chances of actually healing are going to be so much more increased, because you're getting more input, you're getting more ideas, you're getting more inspiration, you're able to vocalize and share what you're going through. Writing is also a really fantastic resource. If you're not a verbal processor and don't like to share, writing can be something else to help kind of get the emotion out of your body. And there are literally hundreds of different, journaling journals that you can buy, but also like write grief journal programs out there online that you can also participate in, to help kind of work through some of those initial feelings.
So this is so beautiful, and thank you so much for sharing. This is so much of value so far, and I hope you, wherever you are listening, you are also finding value in this. So basically, there are like a lot of things that you can do, and a lot of resources that you can go to, and so I just want to get like a quick answer in here. Like, there are some people who really we see them, they are doing quite very well, like in like morning, like they are very well, like very quick, they don't spend too much time, they are quickly back to life. They are like, like some people, they are like, it's like almost they don't grieve, like even after a loss of somebody or something like that. So I just want to ask here, like quickly, is there anything or any secret why those people get quick healing or quick overcoming of that whatever process, whatever situation they've been through, or nothing is there to mention?
I personally have not seen a lot of that, or not seen a lot of that in like true, honest healing and recovery. Do you know what I mean? Like a lot of people, when they just quickly go back to work, or they quickly, go back to like life the way it was, aren't necessarily dealing with their grief. They're usually avoiding it, repressing it, putting it down, pushing it away, hiding it from the people around them. I haven't come across a lot of people that have just been sort of like, okay, I feel okay, I'm all right. You know what I mean? Like, I think of grief. I don't think that all trauma is grief, but I think pretty much all grief is traumatic in some way, right? It changes us in some way. And for us to really give ourselves the time and space to process that isn't something that you can just do overnight. And so what I find is a lot of people, when they say they're fine and they've gone through a loss, they're usually lying in some way. They're usually either lying to themselves or lying to the other people around them, and not really willing to do the work. They're not either ready, or they don't feel capable of actually going through grief in a way that they know they can resolve it. They know they can move through it and move forward, while they've integrated their loss.
So basically, they are like just avoiding it, or just like, ignoring it on the side. But
I mean, again, everybody's different, but that is my experience. That is definitely my
Mhm.
experience.
No, I mean, but what I mean is like there are really some people who undergo like some period of time where they're grieving, but it's just like they take less time than others. So I'm just thinking probably they are more resilient, they are more like accepting, they are more forgiving at initially the things that we mentioned in this podcast earlier. So just like people are already like forgiving the situation before like dwelling into more and more thinking about it. It's just like they are more forgiving, they are more open, they are more accepting, even though it's hard. I know it's a loss, but it's just like there are some people who probably they are more resilient than other, and then they can get back to work after months, while other they might take for them maybe 6 months, and then they are still not feeling able to forgive or stop crying, or like all of these things that might happen. So
Mhm.
um
I think certainly I've worked with some people who are more resilient or are more, let's say, better equipped, well equipped to deal with their current loss. And most of those people, I will say, have gone through multiple losses, have experienced multiple things over their lives, that has allowed them to learn how to integrate and to
mm,
carry and use, that experience to inform then how they want to live the rest of their lives, how they want to act to the people in their lives, how they want to think and feel overall, right? So I think that again, there's a lot of lessons in loss, and these people have taken those lessons to then start to live a little bit differently. And
mm,
so when they go through another loss, it becomes something else to integrate, but they're already more practiced at it.
mm. So basically they have already built the shield and the muscle to overcome the loss that they have been through. It's so beautiful. So what if the grief doesn't go away, and or it takes too long for some people, probably years?
So that might be a sign of complicated loss, right? That might be a sign where they really need to see somebody who's trained as a grief therapist, so that they can start to address what's going on. They might have had a really complex, difficult relationship with the person they lost. They might have gone through a lot of trauma, in their lives where it's really hard to be able to then resolve or work through the current grief. And so if they find that it's taking, and years is actually not a very long time when it comes to grief. But if they're finding that it's taking a prolonged period of time to even again kind of get back to baseline where they can function well and they can focus and they can, sort of move through their day without feeling hopeless, without feeling like, they might want to hurt themselves. That's when I would say if you're experiencing all those things, definitely start looking for a therapist who specializes in grief, because not all do. And when you find maybe a handful, two, three, four different grief therapists, talk to each one of them, find out what their philosophy of healing is and how they think they can help you. And then hopefully within that group, you'll find somebody that you feel really comfortable with and that they can really help guide you through all of the different complexities of grief.
Hmm. So basically, it becomes like a complex level of grieving, and this makes me think: is there like probably it becomes like depression at some point? Is there like is it a complication of grief, or it just like no? It's just like complicated grief. Does
I
it?
mean, depression can indicate complicated grief for sure. Depression could be its own, experience that somebody suffers from, and then they grieve. They're also grieving. You know what I mean? So it could become that they're trying to learn how to walk with both. But hopefully, the depression has been addressed in some way to help kind of again keep them at a certain level where they feel like they can function well. But yeah, depression can be a big sign of complicated grief. It can also just be a sign of grief, right?
Mhm.
But when it becomes prolonged, when it becomes really pronounced, when it starts to feel like it's interrupting the rest of your life and your ability to move through and take care of your responsibilities, that's when you definitely want to start talking to somebody.
So, is there like any clear sign between like when there is depression and or when it's only like the grief, the complicated grief? Is there like any big difference between the clinical depression that we're talking about, or there is no different most of the time?
Well, I'll say that I'm not trained as a therapist, nor am I an expert in clinical depression. So I don't want to say yes or no, absolutely.
Yeah.
What I will say is, you can get diagnosed and really start to understand where you are. Most people who've gone through a loss might go through a period of depression. But again, if it's prolonged, if it becomes something where it, like, again, interrupts their ability to take care of the things they need to take care of, that's when you might, you really want to see if you can get diagnosed. But at the same time, a lot of people get depressed for a period of time and then they start to feel better, or they might take an antidepressant for a short period of time and then they feel like they don't need it anymore. So definitely people who have, non-complicated grief can also feel depressed, but when it's really pronounced and it's really hard to take care of yourself, take care of the things that you normally could take care of, if you start to feel suicidal, any of those things are red flags.
Mm-hmm. So then probably like the person should just go and have like a check and then consult again, like somebody who's in the field, either a coach, a psychologist, a therapist, a consultant, or anybody like who can help you to identify or heal or support you in any way how. And this is like tough period anyways. Grief is not easy. A loss is not easy. So please do not feel shame or do not feel that you are like shy or feel that you are unique, that you cannot share this, or please just go ahead and help yourself out, serve yourself. And because if you don't do, nobody gonna do it on your behalf. So please just like help yourself, serve yourself the
Absolutely.
way best
And
is for you.
if people are really struggling, because I know that even that initial step of helping ourselves can feel so hard and overwhelming, I would say the first place to start is with your doctor. Start with your primary care and say, here's how I'm feeling. I need help. I think I might want to be on medication, or I don't know, how to deal with this. And, hopefully that doctor can help either refer you to a
Mhm.
psychiatrist, a therapist, whatever kind of resource that you need. That can be at least a good first start. And always check with your insurance, see what they cover. A lot of insurances do cover grief counseling as well as therapy, or psychiatry. So, those three could be a good place to start if you are feeling like really depressed again. You might want to hurt yourself. You feel hopeless. You feel like you can't get through your day, and it's been months or years, right, of feeling that way. So that can be a really good place just to start. It could be an easy phone call, especially if you have a doctor that you trust. And then from there, you can start to take the next step and the next step. Because it is, even especially when we're grieving, just getting up out of bed sometimes, just brushing our
Yeah.
teeth sometimes, just making sure we get a meal, you know what I mean, can be a feat, can be something you celebrate. So I want to make it as easy as possible for people to take that first step.
Mm-hmm. And indeed, grief can also cause us to feel withdrawal from the society and from people around us, and feel us just like retreat in a shell and then sit by ourselves, close the door and stuff. So, what advice would you say to those people who just like, like they get already dwell in that like loneliness of the grieving by themselves?
I want to encourage them to reach out. There are so many people that are well trained in grief, who understand how to hold space, who understand how to be supportive, who know what the kind of cliche things that most people will say, we know how they don't help. And so, we're social beings. We want to feel connection. We need that sense of belonging, right? So I really want to encourage people to understand you don't have to bear this weight alone. Grief is not something that you have to walk with alone. And in whatever sort of form of support that you want, there are people out there who know how to support you, who know or understand how to help you. They've been trained, right? They've been studying this for years. There's, all these different modalities and methods to support people in grief. So definitely, consider that you can find one person, right? And if you find one person, you might be able to find two, and then three, and then your community will grow. But really, as much as you can, at least start to find that one person and take that first step, like I said. And then remember that you're also not always going to feel this way. Like, time alone won't heal your grief, right? I always say healing is a proactive process, so you've got to be willing to do the work. And sometimes the work is, again, just making one phone call to your doctor, right? Sometimes it's just talking to one friend and saying, I'm not okay, and then seeing if they can help you find or make a phone call for you. You know what I mean? So making sure that you're willing to take that first step in whatever form or fashion is critical.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I mean, I'm aware that we are almost closing now. This is almost the end of our show today, and I just like want quickly to ask you like, some myth versus reality type of thing. There are a lot of things that we hear about grief, and I just wanted to like in just a yes or myth, like yes or no, or myth or reality type of answer from you. So, is crying it together heals faster?
I'm sorry, say it again. Is crying?
Trying it together in a group of people or with family who undergone the same loss would make the healing faster.
Oh, maybe. It
Or
could. It
it
could.
helps, or does it help or not?
It could. It can help, and it can hurt. So it's hard to say yes or no. But I would say more often than not, getting some kind of support, yes, will help.
Okay, the pain will go away faster if you ignore it. Myth or reality?
No.
No.
Myth.
Okay.
Huge myth.
It's important to be strong and show bravery in the face of loss and not cry so people don't see you low.
Myth. 100%.
If you don't cry, it means you aren't sorry about the loss.
Myth. Oh, an insulting myth at that.
So there are a lot of people who don't cry, not because they are not they are not losing, they are not feeling the loss, but it's just like that's how who they
Yeah.
are. So it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be there. Is letting it out physically, like hitting things or like doing something physically, will help you to get out of your grief period.
Sometimes it can help in the moment for sure. For sure.
Mm. Okay, grieving should last about a year at least.
No myth.
Moving on with your life means forgetting about your loss and getting a new life.
It feels real when we're in the moment, but it's a huge myth.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your knowledge and for your expertise, for what you shared with us. I really enjoyed having you today. And I hope wherever you are watching or listening to us, you also enjoyed our show today. And I wish you like have a good and a beautiful healing period. And if you need anything, please reach out to Nesreen Ahmed or any other person you know that can help you best. And thank you so much for being with us today, Nesreen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I hope this was helpful to a lot of people.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And I hope to see you in another show. Thank you. Bye.